Hello, my name is Ev from Vincent Music, and today we're going to be having a look at reading music quickly and understanding what's in it, how to read the notes, how to understand the rhythms. So you should be able to see the music, and so let's have a look at what we can tell about this piece. We'll only have a look at sort of the first few lines. So let's begin by looking before there's even any notes. So on the clef, on the staff, just before that first F, what do we see? We see the treble clef, so we know what the notes are. We see the key signature, which is a B flat. So throughout this whole piece, anytime you see a B, it's B flat. We know this, and that the time signature is 3/4, which means that there are 3 crotchet beats in any bar. This is all, we know these things, but it's good to keep those in our minds while we're having a look through the music. We also have things like tempo, allegretto, crotchet 96, but when we're first learning a piece and having a look at it, it's okay to go slower than the tempo in order to make sure we know what's going on and we're not just rushing through it without any idea of what's happening. So let's have a look at the first bar. Each crotchet beat has a different rhythm to it, so we need to figure out, okay, what are all the rhythms here? So that first one, for our first 2 notes, is a dotted crotchet and then a semiquaver. So we think, okay, 3 semiquavers that we hold, and then a quaver. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Yeah? So that's how we figure out that rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4 for that first bar. We also have to look at what the notes are doing. So they're going, these are in a fairly readable register, but it's still good to get an idea of what the pattern is. So the first 3 notes are all going up. They're all 1 step above each other. Line, space, line. Then the next note is the same, and then we go down. This is telling us what the contour of the piece is, so we can roughly hear in our heads what it will sound like before we play it. It's okay if we don't know exactly what it's going to sound like, but we want to know roughly what it will sound like. So we have a look at this first bar. We have our rhythm, our dotted quaver, semiquaver, crotchet, full crotchet, and then 2 quavers. We figured this out. If you need to put on a metronome, you can do that in order to really figure out what the rhythms are. But if you don't really know what that rhythm is going to sound like yet, I'd like you to pause and really, put on a metronome, really try and figure it out before listening to me play it, and see whether you are correct. So that first bar goes 3. And the beginning of the next bar. So I hope you got that rhythm correct, and roughly the contour as well. So it goes up a little bit, and then we come back down. So that next bar, even though the notes are different, the rhythm is exactly the same. It's exactly the same rhythm. So we figured out that first rhythm, so that means we already know the rhythm for the next bar. Notes are a little bit different though. So just by looking at it quickly, we can see, okay, it comes back to the highest note of the bar before, and then it keeps going up, and then getting that jump from, as we count, the C, up to that next note is a little bit tricky to sight read and initially see. But if we have to, if you're in a sight reading situation, you would just sort of guess. But we're not sight reading; we're having a solid look, so we can just count. And then really have in our heads, okay, this is what the note is. So if we have a count, we know that the first line is an A, and then space is B, and the next line is C, next space is D, next line is E, and that space that note is on is F. So we've counted up, gets at F. And now we keep in our heads that that is an F. So then when we come back to that note, okay, for the duration of this, that line, we have 3 lines and then it's on that space, that's an F. Just going to keep it in our heads. So that next bar, so that second bar, we keep going up, and then we have a leap up to that F, and it will sound like this. And then for the next bar, we don't need to be able to read directly what that next note is, because it is 1 note down from that F. So what's 1 note down from F? It's E. Congratulations. So we have the F, then we come down to the E. This is how we figure out what the notes are when there's so many ledger lines and you don't really want to count it. Sure, as you get more experience, you will just be able to see that, you know, 3 lines and then the space above it is an F. But when that's not really clear in your head, if you can count to get to the first ones, or it's a scale going up, sometimes you'll just have like basically a scale. So we start on the F on the line, and then it will just keep going up, and then you sort of just play the number of notes going up, and in this case it would be an F major scale, or whatever scale it is, in whatever key, and then we end on that F. There are lots of ways to be able to figure out what it is without having to physically figure out the note every time. So, coming back to the third bar, come down to the E, and the rhythm for this bar is different to the rhythms for the previous 2 bars, but it's similar, and also it's a bit simpler. We just have 2 quavers, so if we sort of have our metronome going, ti, ti, ta, ti, ti, ta, ti, ti, ta. Yep. Ti, ti, ta, ti, 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 ta, etc. So that's the rhythm. You'll also may have noticed in the 4th bar, the rhythm in the 4th bar is the same as the rhythm in the 3rd bar. So you figure out the rhythm for the 3rd bar, you figured out the rhythm for the 4th bar. These are also useful patterns to keep in our head, so we don't have to figure out the same rhythm every time. It's the same rhythm as some point previously. How convenient. Sometimes music does that. It's very nice of them to just give us the same rhythm but with different notes. Less to figure out. So, let's come back to that 3rd bar again. I'd like you to have a figure out of what it should sound like, or have a play of it. You figured out the rhythm, we figured out the notes. Have a play of the 3rd, and if you can, the 4th bar. The 3rd and then the 4th bar right after each other, and see if you've gotten that correct. Have a pause, do that, and then I will play what it should sound like. 2, 3. There we go. There are also some dynamics. We're not thinking too hard about them for the time being, but feel free to put them in. So now, I'd like you to have a pause in a second and go back and see if you remember those first 2 bars as well. We figured it out, but now we've done us working out how 2 bars. Pause, go back and play the first 4 bars, and remembering what those rhythms are as they go up. We've now figured it all out, so it should be in your head, but have a pause and do that. Excellent. So now let's come to the 5th bar. What do you notice about the 5th bar? Does it look the same as any of the previous bars that we've done? It looks like the 1st bar. The first bar and the 5th bar, exactly the same. You figure out the 1st bar, you figure out the 5th bar. You don't need to re-figure it out. It's the same as one before. So play with that, and then the 6th bar, so the last bar of that line, it looks at the start similar to the 2nd bar, but then it does something funky. So we have the first note, the first beat is the same. The A, B flat in that rhythm, and the C is the same, but we do a little trill on it. Remember 2nd trill key for that C. We're just going to ignore the turn for now. Then the rhythm is the same as in the 2nd bar, and the 5th bar and the 1st bar, but the notes are a little bit different. So we have our C, and then it's 1 note above the C but flattened. What's 1 note above the C but flattened? D flat. Then we have a new note that we have to possibly figure out, or you might be able to notice a pattern. It's okay if you haven't noticed exactly what the pattern is for that yet, but if we have a look at that 2nd bar, we can see that from the C to the F, there's a line, a whole extra line, and then the F is on the space. So the C is on the line, sorry. We then have another line, and then it's on the space above that. For the D flat to whatever flat this next note is, you'll notice that it's on a space, and then we have another line, and then if it was on that space, and then yet another line, it's on that line. So they are the same amount of notes apart. If you count it, it's 4 notes apart. Or 4, line, space, notes apart. So, if from C to F is the 4 notes apart, then D flat 2 is 4 notes apart. That is 2 G flat. So, that's a similar pattern to the one before, it just looks a little bit different. It's a different kind of pattern. But you can also count the lines and spaces to get to G flat. G flat is the same as F sharp, remember the fingering is thumb down. It's like a regular F sharp, except you take off this middle finger. So if I play from the 5th bar, this 5th bar and 6th bar, this is what it should sound like. Sorry, I went on to the next one. So, and that's what it should sound like. As we go on to bar 7, we suddenly have a whole set of new notes. A new rhythm. But it's also not a very difficult rhythm. It's just 4 semiquavers. If we have our crotchet going in our head, da, da, dugga, 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 dugga. Now, it's possible that you've gotten to this point, you're like, oh, I don't know, I can't play semiquavers that fast. That's okay. Go back and play the whole thing at a tempo that you definitely can play those semiquavers that fast. So let's have a look at what those semiquavers are. It's 1 note down from that G flat, which is F. Then we've seen the C before, so that's 2 on the line. Then down to the A, then down to the F. So have a think, have a play of that. How fast can you realistically play that? Is it dugga dugga? If that's your speed, dugga 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 dugga. Then try and figure out that first, the first line at that tempo. Have a pause, go through that, put on a metronome if you need to, in order to make sure that you're doing it quite consistently. So let's come back to bar 7. So we figured out the rhythm for the first beat. It's just 4 semiquavers. We figured out the notes. Fantastic. For that next bit, for this next little bit, it might be useful to subdivide in semiquavers for the whole bar. So because we've already had to subdivide, which means thinking in our heads in that amount. So big beats are crotchets, but we're thinking in the semiquavers because we have to play them. Dugga, 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 dugga. They just keep going in your head, even when you're not saying them out loud. So for the next beat, we can figure out that rhythm because it's a quaver, which is how many semiquavers? It's 2 semiquavers. And then we have the 2 quavers, and then we have that dotted quaver semiquaver that we saw in the first beat of the piece. So let's now put that all together on our heads. I'd like you to have a pause and really, really think about the dugga, dugga, and then keep subdividing, but play those notes. And yes, the notes jump down quite a bit. Take a moment to figure out, okay, this is what they're going to be. Take note of that B natural accidental in there. The one time when you don't do the flat, that's in the key signature. So yeah, have a pause and have a figure out of that. Fantastic. I hope that that's come easily. And yeah, so let's move on to that next bar. It's just 2 notes, crotchet. As we come, so from that bar 7, we have the G, and the A, and then coming back down to the G for the beginning of the 8th bar, and then down to the F. So it's moving stepwise is what we call it when they're all next to each other. So that's the end of that phrase. It's 8 bars, fantastic. I'd like you to have a pause again and play through those whole 8 bars, remembering what it is that all the notes are, and what it is that you figured out. I'd like you to have a go of doing that first, and then I'll have a play after, and you can see how it compares. Okay? Have a pause. Alright, we're back. This is what I will play. You also may have found it difficult when you were playing through to play through in using only the breaths that were marked. Just take a breath when you need to after any crotchet, if you need to break slurs, that's okay. These are the things that we have to do when we play, especially when we don't know a piece very well. As you get better, your lung capacity will get better to play through it, but for now, it's okay if you're having to break slurs to get through it. If that was a problem before, have a pause, break some slurs if you have to, but make sure you keep in time. Okay, fantastic. Now, let's come back to bar 9, new bar, and what do we notice about that rhythm? it's similar, it starts the same as in those first bars, but then we have a crotchet instead of two quavers. So very convenient, just we figure out what the first note is. It also might be worth noting that jump from the G to the C is also 4 notes. So it's going from a space to a couple of lines and then a line, which is the same as at the at the end of the previous line, the D flat to the G flat. So these kind of patterns, this 4-note jump is coming up quite a lot in this piece. But instead of being quavers, here it's in crotchets. So yeah, have a play of that bar. We figured out the rhythm. We've already figured out that dotted quaver, semi-quaver in that first beat. And then we have the 2 crotchets. Have a go. Fantastic. Then when we get to the next bar, we encounter a new rhythm, which, if you also have a look to that next bar, comes up again a little bit. So we have the triplets. So in our head, we've been subdividing a little bit in semi-quavers, especially in bar 7, but possibly in other sections as well. Now, semi-quavers are not going to help us when it comes to triplets, so we just sort of keep our crotchet beat going. So for semi-quavers, it was dugga, 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 or whatever tempo that you're able to play it at. So for the for the triplets, we need to divide it into 3. So dugga, 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 triplet, 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 triplet. Have that going a little bit in your head. What is very conveniently written about this music is that in the previous bar, we had to subdivide a little bit in semi-quavers in order to make sure our dotted quaver, semi-quaver are in time. But then you have 2 whole glorious beats of just crotchets that you can subdivide in your head however you like. It's very convenient of them. So, thank you, Demesman. So, if you want to, and I would suggest doing it, you can put on your metronome to subdivide to just have some crotchets at whatever tempo is good for you. Then, I'd like you to practice subdividing in your head, say it out loud, in semi-quavers, so dugga, 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 then triplets. Triplet, triplet, dugga, 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 triplet, triplet, dugga, dugga, dugga. So practice going between those 2 in order to understand how to switch better when we come from our subdivided semiquavers to then come into our subdivided triplets. I'd like you to spend a little bit of time doing that, then come back and figure out what the notes are for, in that next bar. It starts on the same note as the previous bar ended on that C. When it comes down, then you should be able to read those next 2 notes a little bit more easily. Have a figure out if that is, and then I will play the bars in order to confirm that it's all correct. Alright, we're back. I will have a play. Let's confirm that you got it correct. Great. Just remember to hold that minim for a whole minim, but also you can take a breath, cut it short for a crotchet, take a breath. Just make sure that you don't come in for the next bar too early. So let's have a look at that next bar. This is where we're going to have to be able to switch more quickly from those semiquavers to the triplets, which we've already done, and then be able to switch back quite quickly. So might be worth taking a little bit of a moment, putting on that metronome again, and just going bar to bar, beat to beat. Triplet, dugga, dugga, triplet, dugga, dugga. It's okay if it's not perfect and it's quite difficult to do, but sort of give it a try, because it will help with that next bar when we have some triplets and then we have some quavers, which is just 2 semiquavers. So we also, having a look at those notes, they're not going up by step, which is a little bit inconvenient because it means all that scales practice isn't really coming in handy right now. It does in other places, but at this particular moment, not so much. So, let's figure out what it is. So we have line, line, line. So we have the G, then we skip a note, then skip a note again, then stepwise, skip a note, skip a note. Then, that's quite a big jump from that high D down to that bottom G, but you know what that it's a G because that's what the bar started on. Being able to pick out within a bar what the notes that are the same are, even if you sort of end up missing some of the other notes, that's okay. We come back down to the notes that we do know what they are because we've seen them before. So, come back down to the G, we go up in the triplets, and then back down in the quavers. So that's fantastic. Have a play with that. It's okay if the rhythm doesn't quite work, but if you keep the metronome on, it will keep you honest to what the rhythm should be. So yeah, have a play of that, and then we'll come back to the next bar. No, then I will have a play of it, and then we'll move on to the next bar. So this is what it should sound like. Of course, you can take breaths wherever you need to. Then the next bar, if we just ignore those grace notes, so that like D sharp, whatever, it's quite simple. We just have 2 crotchets and then the dotted quaver, semiquaver that we've worked on before. Easy. Figuring out what that note is might be a little bit difficult to do when you first have a look at it. The first note of the bar, but in that previous bar, we know that we came up to a D, which we got up to by going, through the okay, we skip a note, space, okay, then we don't, then etc, etc. And then this note that we begin bar 12 on is exactly, it's one note above the highest note of the previous bar, which we figured out was a D. Yes, we go down to the G in between these 2 notes, but that's just we do a fun thing down there. So we have the D, and then we go up 1 note to the E. Don't worry about the trill for now, just hold that E. Then we come down to the 2 notes down, which is a C. And then we come down to what is hopefully a fairly recognisable note, that G and that rhythm. Then, if we look at that next bar, bar 13, what you should notice is that it is exactly those 2 bars, 13 and 14, we have seen exactly the same thing before. Literally exactly the same in bar 9. Exactly the same. So you figured out bar 9 and 10, you know bars 13 and 14. Then most of that next bar, bar 15, is also the same as that bar before as well. We just have a different, the G, or that's quite a big skip up to the, from that high D. It goes up quite high. But you should know what that note is, because it's exactly the same jump of notes that we had at the end of the first line, that D flat to G flat. This is D to G. They're both naturals because they don't have flats in front of them. If you don't remember what a G is, it is a regular G, but you take off your thumb. It's also okay if that G doesn't come out. We're not looking so much for perfect playing for this. We're working out how are we figuring out the music. It's also okay if this is sort of washing over your head a little bit. Feel free to watch it a couple of times to really understand the process that we're going through in order to understand the music. So, coming back to bar 15, it's mostly the same, except instead of that last note dropping down, it's going up just 4 notes. Then we come back to the C for the next bar, and then we need to, in that crotchet, we need to rethink in triplets because we've had to go triplets and then back to semiquavers and all through those quavers. Then that is a free crotchet. Use that if you can to go back into thinking triplets in order to get that next bar. So I'm now going to play. I'd like you to figure out those notes and the jumps between them, the rhythm, because we've talked through it and hopefully that makes it a little clearer. And then I would like, so have a pause, figure that out, and then I will play from bar 9 to where we just got to, bar 16. Okay, I will have a play, and hopefully what I play sounds similar to what you played. It's okay if you played it slower than what I played it, that's totally okay. But if the rhythm was the same, and the jumps between the notes, the intervals were the same, the notes were the same, that's absolutely fine. Now, We're not going to go too much further, but if we just have a look at the next two bars, what two bars that we've played previously are they exactly the same as? Have a think. It is bars 5 and 6. It's exactly the same. You've done this, you know what it is. Music likes to come back. It then sort of goes off into a bit of a tangent that we're not going to look at. Yeah, this was just to understand how we would go through the process of figuring out, what the notes are, figuring out the rhythms, yeah, and just beginning to have it come a little bit more easily, some little tricks. I hope this was helpful. And yeah, it's okay if it didn't all come in immediately. It's just some ideas to help you do it more easily in your own reading in the future. So you can go and find some more music, on Flute tunes, and have a look at that. So yeah, I hope this was helpful, and I will see you.